Well, my name is Ron Keefe for the Granite Brewery. We have been here at Eglinton and Mount Pleasant in Toronto for almost 25 years now. On March 1st, it'll be 25 years that we opened up. And since that time, we have been brewing every day, well, not every day, but every week certainly in the last 25 years, and we've cranked out a fair amount of beer over the last years. We use a fairly unique system in Canada, at least, and in North America. It's typically known as the Ringwood system. It's an open fermentation style of brewing that you don't see very often. A lot of brewers, a lot of people get nervous when they see this, the tanks wide open to the air, to all the impurities that supposedly are out there. But it's a system that we hope that we use well and have perfected over the years. And it's the Ringwood system because primarily we use the Ringwood yeast. And the Ringwood yeast is out of the Ringwood Brewery in England that is small one of the first microbreweries that came in the early 80s in England, in the south of England, opened by a guy named Peter Austin. Peter unfortunately just passed away last year at the ripe old age of 92 or 3, but he really perfected this system. And along with someone who he mentored, Alan Pugsley, and Alan started off at the Ringwood and then moved on to bigger and better things in the United States, Shipyard being one of them, Wild Goose and several other ones. Alan's also known for getting McCausland's going, lots of breweries around anyhow. But I trained with Alan at the Wild Goose Brewery in, I guess, 1990, I believe it was, 1991, and the Wild Goose Brewery in Cambridge, Maryland. And Alan, he took me through the whole process of the Ringwood system. And it really is the yeast that gives its character. A lot of people are a little nervous about it because it is a style of brewing that's actually hands-on and directly hands-on. When we first learned, we actually would wash our hands all up, sterilize them, put our hands right in the yeast to get it all going, and then pitch it live into the fermenter. The yeast of the Ringwood style, at least, is really quite it's unique in a lot of yeast because it really does have a big impact on the final flavor of the beer. And not all yeasts are like that, but this one really does have a big impact. And it's got a sort of fruity character to it that comes through, and certainly people, again, with fine palates can pick up some of the slight similarities between our beers. We have a wide range of beers, 14, 15 different types of beers. But there is the yeast, we use it for all our beers except the wheat beer that we do. And it brings a certain characteristic, fruitiness, a little bit of floral to it that is really specific to that yeast. It's a great yeast, it's extremely hardy. One of the reasons that it can maintain itself and do well and flocculate like crazy in an open style fermenters is because it's extremely hardy. And it obviously, when the yeast is open, is subject to all the impurities that are naturally in the air, everything just from what's ever there to something as simple as a fruit fly. But the yeast is very hardy and basically can fight off any sort of infection from another yeast, cross-contamination of yeast. And basically that's what has always been put to me, that if two yeasts come together, one of them being Ringwood, the Ringwood will win, and the other ones are left by the wayside. So it's very hardy and very strong. It ferments quickly, it ferments aggressively, and it's just a great yeast to work with. So that's something that we're very, very proud of and do. And again, we've stuck with it all these years, and we have no intention of ever changing.
Okay, why the open fermenter then? Like, does it not work in a closed fermenter? Do people do that?
The Ringwood yeast does not work in a closed fermenter. Now, to be perfectly honest, I've never tried it in a closed fermenter. We only have open fermenters here. But the research that I've read and people have told me about says it does not. It needs the air, it needs the oxygen to really work and do its thing. So it has to have that. That openness, the air. It needs that for things to work properly, for the yeast to really take off. And when it starts very aggressively. The yeast goes like crazy the first night. It's all over the place, and that's our biggest problem, is keeping it in the fermenter and not all over the floor in that, because it flocculates up over the top of the fermenters onto the floor, which is a bit of a pain, but you can tell that it's working quite well.
It does that every time, right?
Every time, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
That's part of the. Now, I mean, we have certain fermenters, depending on the size. If we push our volumes a little bit, try to get absolutely as much as we can out of it, then we might run into a situation where it comes right over the top. But we've actually had to add fermenter extensions on it just to keep the yeast in there. Doesn't affect the brew or anything, it just makes the cleanup that much more difficult.
And then you're transferring the used yeast over. It's viable, it moves well.
It is. We do it one of two ways when we're brewing. So when typically here, it's about a 3-day process to bring it down to its final gravity, 3 days of fermentation. So if we're brewing on a Monday, we pitch the yeast Monday afternoon at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. Typically by Thursday morning, say in that example, 2.5, 3 days, it's reached its final gravity, and then we'll do one of two things. We will skim it off to crop it off the top, put it in a sterile bucket, and put it in the refrigerator to just keep it cool, put it into suspension, and then we'll just bring that out and pitch it into the next brew the next day or two whenever we need it. Sometimes when we're brewing, in that example, say on a Monday, we might be brewing again on a Tuesday. Then if we're right by the fermenter, we might actually just stand on top with a scoop and take it right out of one fermenter and pitch it right into the next fermenter. And that starts the whole process. That's the best way to go. The yeast is going, it's kicking butt, so to speak, and it's moving fast and furious. You pitch it into the next brew and it just takes off right away.
Do the beers move to secondary, or are they primary right into like brights for package?
No, they're typically here. It's 1 week in the primary fermenter, and then we would move it from into a secondary fermenter or directly into cask.
Which is a secondary?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The secondaries are closed, yeah.
The secondaries are closed, yes. So after week 1, it goes into the secondary fermenter. And it goes in there, and that's when it's sealed up at that time, and it's also conditioning tank, we call it, and that's where the conditioning starts to take place. The carbonation starts to place the secondary fermentation, but it does happen in a closed vessel at that time. So once it leaves the primary, it's not going to be exposed to the atmosphere, so to speak, until it hits your glass, whenever that is.
The open top fermenters, are they temp controlled? They're like jacketed?
Everything is temperature controlled, yes, yeah. So we set them. Typically, we have a very narrow band when we pitch in the yeast. We want it ferments. The Ringwood yeast ferments well between about 18 degrees Celsius and 22 degrees Celsius. So we have them set at around 20, 21, and that's when we get the nice even fermentation that'll come down in that 2.5, 3 days that I mentioned.
I know for a while your casks were notorious for re-fermenting a bit and really popping when you tap them.
Well, they do. Our casks are still like that, and that's another feature of the Ringwood yeast, because when you move it into the secondary fermenter, in this case the cask, there is a fair amount of residual yeast left in there, and that yeast is still working. It's still conditioning. It's still carbonating. And so yes, you have to learn very quickly. You never stand over a cask when you tap it. You got to stand back and cover it sometimes. But they can be very, very aggressive, shall we say?
Let's just say active.
Active, yes.
I like active.
Yes.
I've found personally they're less explosive than they used to be.
Yeah.
They're a little bit more. They still go. But I haven't had a wedge fly out in a while.
Yeah.
So
every once in a while, we get we'll get a call from one of our licensees saying, hey, the cask blew up, came out. I mean, this doesn't happen often, but once in a while. And, say, hey, you're not supposed to leave those things by the furnace. They've got to go in the refrigerator. They got to stay at temperature control. Yeah. And that is one of the problems with cask beers. Some people still don't really know the best way to maintain it, to hold it.
Well, I'd like to thank Ryan Keefe over at the Granite Brewery.
good friend, great guy, amazing brewer. It was a fantastic explanation. Open fermentation. The cool thing is Granite Brewery, you can see right into the brewery from the restaurant, so definitely head over. It's Mount Pleasant and Eglinton right here in Toronto, and check them out. They're always happy to show you the brewery, let you know what's happening, give you an explanation. The food's great and the beer's fantastic. So thanks to Ron and the crew. Keep on watching here. Cycle Less videos. We're going to keep these videos coming. All sorts of neat stuff, insights into brewing you wouldn't otherwise get. Thanks for watching.